And then he like gets like weirdly close to me.
Ooh.
And he says, and the right kind of massage. And in the 6 or 8 steps it takes to get from his house to my house, my wife and I decided that I will never be in the room with that disgusting person ever again. So I was never in the room with him socially, for business, or for even philanthropy. If that guy was there, I wasn't going because he's gross. I wasn't going because he's gross.
But here's what's strange to me. The United States Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, goes on a podcast and he explains exactly how Jeffrey Epstein's blackmail operation worked. The massage table, the plea deal, the videos. He explains it like he read it in a manual. And then the documents drop. And it turns out he went to the island in 2012, 4 years after Jeffrey Epstein was charged with soliciting sex from a minor. He brought his wife, his kids, even his nannies. And when Congress asks him why, he says he can't remember. The man who knew exactly how Jeffrey Epstein blackmailed people couldn't remember why he had lunch with him on his island. I don't know what that means, but I think it means something. Okay, before we go any further, I need to say something clearly because this video is going to go somewhere most mainstream media outlets aren't. Everything I'm about to tell you is either a documented fact with a named source, or it's clearly flagged as a question, a theory, or something people are asking that hasn't been answered. I'm not telling you Howard Lutnick is a criminal. I'm not telling you he knew. I'm not going to tell you what to think. What I am telling you is that when you line up everything this man has been connected to, 9/11, Trump, Netanyahu, Epstein, Tether, the US bond market, and when you look at him smiling, still in office, protected, I think the pattern is worth examining. So that's what we're gonna do. Howard Lutnick is 64 years old. He is the United States Secretary of Commerce. He controls America's trade and tariff policy.
Let's build the American economy up.
Great Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick.
He oversees 50,000 government employees. He was one of the 24 people on Earth who could trade federal bonds directly with the Federal Reserve. Almost nobody knows his name, and that's not an accident. He was born in 1961, Jericho, New York. He lived a comfortable life. His father was a history professor and his mum taught art history. A completely normal childhood, until it wasn't. His mother dies of cancer when Howard's 17, and the following year his dad also passes away from cancer. Howard's first week of college, 2 parents gone back to back. Think about what that does to a person. He later described how his extended family sort of pulled away from him. You're either in or you're out. What I learned in 1979, all my relatives, they stepped out. His college gave him a full scholarship to stay enrolled. He graduated and joined Wall Street at a firm called Cantor Fitzgerald. Just 8 years later, at 29, he's the CEO. 29, but here's where it gets interesting. When the firm's founder, Bernie Cantor, was dying on life support, Lutnick moved in to wrest control away from the Cantor family. The widow wanted to sell, but Lutnick fought her in court and won. That tells you everything you need to know about this guy. Ruthless, I wouldn't say is the right word. It's more unsentimental. He learned growing up that people leave when things get hard, so he stopped waiting for other people's permission anymore. By 2001, Cantor Fitzgerald isn't just a successful Wall Street firm. It's the infrastructure of the American bond market. More than 70% of all US Treasury securities, America's national debt, the backbone of global finance, flows through Cantor Fitzgerald. They aren't a player in the market. In many ways, you could say that they are the market. Then September 11th happens. I want to be respectful here because what happened on the 11th to everybody in that building was genuinely devastating. 658 employees died, 2/3 of the firm's entire New York workforce, including Howard Lutnick's brother Gary, who he'd brought into the company himself. Lutnick survived because that morning he took his 5-year-old son Carl to his first day of kindergarten. He became the face of the tragedy, the weeping CEO on national television. America watched him grieve in real time. The Financial Times named him Person of the Year. And then the next day, he cut off to pay the victims' families. He said he had to save the company and protect the remaining employees. It took years and enormous public pressure before $180 million was distributed. I'm not saying he was wrong. I'm saying the man who cried on national TV was doing cold business calculations the next day. Both things are true simultaneously. That's Howard Lutnick. And out of the rubble, Cantor Fitzgerald was back. The staff and the offices were all gone, but the systems, the electronic pipelines where 70% of America's treasuries flowed through, those came back within weeks. He came out of 9/11 more powerful than before. But we're getting ahead of ourselves because before we get to Epstein, before we get to Trump, Tether, and the bond market, I want to show you the full picture of what this man built. Because the reason Howard Lutnick isn't untouchable isn't Epstein, it's everything else. Let me tell you the fastest way to understand what type of a man Howard Lutnick is. One company controls the reserve assets backing the world's largest stablecoin. That company belongs to Howard Lutnick's family, and Howard Lutnick writes the regulations. That's just one piece. Let me show you the full picture. It's November 2024. Trump has just won the presidential election. And before a single cabinet member is confirmed, before a single policy is written, one man is put in charge of deciding who gets into the most powerful government on earth. That man is Howard Lutnick. He co-chairs the transition team, which means he vets the staff. He screens the candidates. He decides who gets a seat on the table. And then once he's finished building the cabinet, he walks through the door himself. Think about what that means. The man who decided who gets into the administration is the administration. He didn't join Trump's team. He assembled it, including himself. That is not normal. This has never been normal. Lutnick had been cultivating this for years. His relationship with Trump goes back to the early 2000s. Manhattan elite, same circles, celebrity apprentice, friendly. But in 2024, Lutnick went all in. He donated $14 million of his own money to Trump's campaign. $9 million went directly to MAGA Inc. Then he hosted a fundraiser that raised $15 million in a single night. He wasn't buying access, he was buying architecture.
I have known Donald Trump for decades, and I supported his campaign. But once Donald Trump got elected, I was all in with Donald Trump. And he came over to my house. I had him to fundraisers. I did all sorts of things together with him. And then towards the end of his campaign, at the end of his presidency, when he was running again, then I went all in big. I raised a lot of money for him. I gave him a lot of money, and I was all in for Donald Trump. And I spent lots of time with him. We played golf together. We would hang out. And I always talked to him, oh, you're running again. And even when he was saying, I'm not running again, I'd say, oh, you're running again. You're running again.
Trump gave Lutnick commerce, which on paper sounds boring. Census Bureau, weather statistics, patent office. But Trump also gave him the tariffs, which is genuinely insane. Here's the one thing you need to understand about money. Stocks and bonds move in opposite directions during a crisis. When the economy looks bad, when recession is coming, people flee stocks and pile into bonds. Bonds go up, stocks go down. Cantor Fitzgerald is a bond firm. It has been since 1945. Bonds are its entire business. So Lutnick becomes the Commerce Secretary. He helps push through Liberation Day, the most aggressive tariff policy in America's entire history.
Well, stocks tumbled for a second day as financial markets suffered the biggest two-day drop since the pandemic.
The economic fallout from President Trump's tariffs has heightened concerns of a recession and a global trade war. The Dow Jones Industrials fell more than 2,200 points, erasing more than a year of stock market gains and wiping out trillions of dollars in investor wealth. And the price of nearly everything Americans buy is about to go up.
And billionaire investor Bill Ackman, a Trump ally, not a Democrat, gets on Twitter and writes this. I just figured out why Howard Lutnick is indifferent to the stock market crashing. He and Cantor are long bonds. He profits when our economy implodes. It's an irreconcilable conflict of interest. The man implementing the policy that crashed the market runs a firm that makes money when the market crashes. He looked at America's economy going off a cliff and he was smiling. But it gets worse. While Howard was in Washington pushing tariffs, his son Brandon, who's now running Cantor, allegedly started creating financial products to bet on whether Trump's tariff policy would be declared illegal. Cantor allegedly was buying these rights for 20 to 30 cents on the dollar. As everyone knows, the Supreme Court just struck the tariffs down. Congress investigated. Senators Warren and Wyden wrote to Brandon Lutnick directly, saying his firm's actions raised obvious conflict of interest and insider dealing concerns. Cantor denied executing any trades, but didn't deny their salespeople explored it. Father crashes the market, son bets on the market going down, both make money. Nobody goes to jail. And Howard Lutnick is still smiling. Now, back to what I said at the top. One company controls the reserve assets backing the world's largest stablecoin. That company is Cantor Fitzgerald. The stablecoin Tether USDT, with $120 billion in market cap, more daily transactions than Visa. Tether is always worth exactly $1 because it's backed by US Treasury bonds. Those bonds are held and managed by Cantor Fitzgerald, Howard Lutnick's firm. In April 2024, Cantor acquires a 5% stake in Tether itself for $600 million. Lutnick then goes to Davos personally and vouches for Tether on camera. Then he becomes Commerce Secretary. He refuses to commit to recusing himself from crypto policy. He sits on the White House group working digital assets. They write America's framework for regulating cryptocurrency. He's simultaneously a regulator of crypto, a beneficiary of crypto, and a custodian of the largest reserve backing the world's largest crypto stablecoin. Congress passes the Genius Act, the first major stablecoin regulation in US history. Tether lobbied for it. At the White House signing ceremony, the Tether CEO is sitting at the front row, smiling, right next to Howard Lutnick. When Lutnick was confirmed, ethics rules required him to divest from his stake in Cantor. He sold his stake to his sons. His sons now run Cantor. Brandon is the CEO, Kyle the executive vice chairman. Then Senators Warren and Wyden find something in a New York credit filing, a trust named Dynasty Trust A, with Lutnick's 4 children as beneficiaries. With Lutnick's 4 children listed as beneficiaries had received a loan from Tether. The theory is, Tether may have loaned money to Lutnick's children's trust to help them buy their father's stake, which means he was required to sell to avoid a conflict. Tether, the company he regulates, may have funded the purchase. His children own the company. His children's trust is in debt to Tether. And Lutnick writes Tether's regulations. Warren and Wyden called it potentially a startling revelation, asking whether Tether had effectively bribed the Commerce Secretary through his children. Tether hasn't answered, Lutnick also hasn't answered, but they're still in the room, smiling. There's one more layer, and it runs through the Middle East. Howard Lutnick is one of the most significant pro-Israel donors in United States history. After October 7, his relief fund sent $7 million directly. He and his wife co-chaired a fundraiser for Israeli emergency services that raised $20 million in a single night. Now, who is Stephen Witkoff? Stephen Witkoff is Trump's special envoy to the Middle East. He negotiates with Netanyahu, he negotiates with Hamas, he brokers ceasefire deals. He is also, alongside with the Trump family, a co-founder of World Liberty Financial, a crypto company. The same crypto ecosystem Lutnick is embedded in through Tether and Cantor. Senators have already investigated whether Witkoff used his diplomatic position to advance UAE crypto deals. But he's still in the same role. The other day, he was at the Knicks game, Nothing's happening to him. So here's what you have. The man running America's policy profits when markets crash. His family controls the financial backbone of global crypto. He writes the regulations, and his sons may have bet against his own policies. Tether may have funded his own ethics compliance through his sons. And the man running Middle East foreign policy co-owns a company doing deals with those same countries. Same networks, same donor circles, and all links directly back to Trump. This isn't a conspiracy theory. You can see this plainly. Every single thing I just told you is documented. Congressional letters, Senate filings, ethics disclosure forms, reported by the New York Times, Bloomberg, and the Wall Street Journal. The conspiracy isn't hidden. Nobody's just gone and put them into the same room. But we haven't even gotten to Epstein yet. October 1st, 2025, Howard Lutnick sits down for a podcast interview with a journalist, Miranda Devine. And he says something that when I first heard it, I had to rewind 3 times. The United States Secretary of Commerce just described in detail how Jeffrey Epstein's blackmail operation worked. The massage tables, the plea deal, the videos, the trade.
So, I mean, that's an incredible story that you could pick up that he was a pervert.
It's gross. The guy's gross. Right with my wife. He's gross. Guy's gross. This was not, the deep nuance of Howard Lutnick. This guy's gross.
Right. So how come Bill Gates and all these other people could hang around him and not see what you saw? Or did they see it and ignore it? Or
No, they participated.
Right.
That's what his MO was. Get a massage, get a massage. And what happened in that massage room, I assume was on video. This guy was the greatest blackmailer ever. Blackmailed people. That's how he had money. So
what happened to those videos? Why is there now such a dearth of information when Donald Trump's people are running the FBI and the DOJ?
I assume way back when, they traded those videos in exchange for him getting that 18-month sentence, which allowed him to have visits and be out of jail. I mean, he's a serial sex offender. How could he get 18 months and be able to go to his office during the day and have visitors and stuff? It must have been a trade. So my assumption, I have no knowledge, but my assumption is there was a trade for the videos because there were people on those videos.
He said it casually, confidently, like he was explaining something he already understood. And in the same interview, the same breath, he said that he cut off all contact with Epstein in 2005.
I was the one and done with the guy.
One and done. 4 months later, the DOJ releases millions of files, and Howard Lutnick's name appears over 100 times. Before we get to the timeline of lies, I need to show you something that nobody has reported on properly. Because when Howard claims him and Epstein had no relationship, that they barely knew each other, they're asking you to ignore a paper trail going back to 1988. Not 2005 or 2012, 1988. Here's the address. 11 East 71st Street, Manhattan. That's Lutnick's house. Has been since 1998. A 10,000 square foot townhouse on the Upper East Side, one of the most expensive blocks in New York City. Right next door, literally sharing a wall, is 9 East 71st Street, Jeffrey Epstein's house. And here's where it gets strange. In 1998, a company called Sam Conversion Corp bought what would become Lutnick's house. At the time, Sam Conversion Corp was operating out of a Columbus, Ohio address, associated with Les Wexner, Epstein's billionaire mentor and financier. In 1992, Sam sold it to 1171st Street Trust. The trustee was Epstein. In 1996, they sold it to Comet Trust. In 1998, Comet Trust sold it to Howard Lutnick. Financial tax paper suggests the actual price was $7.6 million. Under congressional questioning, Lutnick said, "I don't know, and I don't think I ever knew Jeffrey Epstein owned the house that I bought." Now, the email that started all of this. December 2012, Lutnick is on a family vacation, yachting through the Caribbean. He writes to Epstein, wants to stop by, asking about dinner. And here's what he writes, his exact words. "Does Sunday evening for dinner sound good? I have another couple, Michael and Marcy Lehrman, with me on my boat, and each of us has 4 children, 2 16s, 2 14s, a 13, a 12, a 11, and a 7-year-old. He lists every child, every age, 8 children in total, in an email to Jeffrey Epstein, who had already pleaded guilty for procuring a minor for prostitution. And then his wife Allison follows up separately. She emails Epstein's assistant. She tells them the group will be a crowd, 2 families each with 4 kids. ranging in age from 7 to 16, 6 boys and 2 girls. 6 boys, 2 girls, ages listed to Epstein's assistant. I'm not going to tell you what to think about those emails. I'll just know Epstein had already been convicted. Lutnick knew what he had been convicted of, and both emails lead with their children, their ages, and their genders before anything else. Make of that what you will. Epstein's reply came back. Come Sat or Sunday lunch. Little St. James on the ramp, behind Christmas Cove. Lutnick confirmed, okay, lunch on Sunday. See you then. 4 days later, on December 28th, Howard and Epstein signed a stock purchase agreement for a company called Adfin. Lutnick for Cantor Fitzgerald subsidiary, Epstein through Southern Trust Company, the same offshore entity at the center of his financial architecture. He goes to the island, they have lunch, 4 days later, they're business partners. Under oath, when asked whether he knew Epstein was an investor in Adfin, Lutnick said, no, to the best of my knowledge, when these documents were released. He didn't know Epstein was a co-investor in the company they both signed after having lunch on his private island. That's a statement of a man under oath, with lawyers in the room. They had months to prepare. Let me lay it out, because seeing it assembled is the only way this all makes sense. Cut off in 2005, never in the same room again. But he drank with him in May of 2011, never in a room with him socially. He had Christmas Eve lunch in 2012 with his whole family there, never for business. The same day he signed an investment agreement, limited interactions. He was still in business through Adfin. I barely knew him, maybe 10 emails in total. His name appears 100 times in the files, emails running to 2018, 13 years after the claimed cutoff. That's 13 years of documented contact after the year he claimed the relationship ended. When these documents came out, Congress was fierce, and he couldn't deny them, it was all there. Instead, he did something much more interesting. He redefined what his original statement meant. When he said, I will never be in a room with that sick, disgusting person ever again, one and done, he clarified under questioning that he meant he would never be with him alone in the same room. But if there was just one other person, it's fine. That's actually what he meant when he said that. Wife and children being on Epstein's island, perfectly fine. That does not count. A congressman named Jesse had asked Howard in the deposition if he was okay with his wife and kids being Epstein. He said that Howard claimed, yeah, he was perfectly fine with it. Jesse said the deposition should have been televised so the public could have seen it. It wasn't. And this is the part that gets to me. Under oath, in a closed house deposition, Howard was asked about that comment he made about Epstein, the greatest blackmailer ever, the videos, the trade, and all of that we just saw. He walked it back completely, said he was just speculating. He said Epstein didn't actually engage in blackmail. So let's be very precise about what just happened. On a podcast, speaking freely with an interviewer who asked the right questions, Howard explained the whole blackmail operation with confidence like he knew it intimately. Under oath, with legal consequences and potential backlash, he said the complete opposite. Walked it back, said he was speculating, and that we should ignore it. Which version do you believe? Now, at the start of this video, I said when we're going to move from documented facts to conspiracy territory. We're in that territory now. But I want you to understand why these questions matter, because they're not coming from random corners of the internet. They're coming from the structure of the documents themselves. Why does Howard Lutnick know so much about the Epstein blackmail operation? Not that he went to the island or kept the contact for 13 years. That part's documented. The question is in the specifics. The massage room, the trade, the plea deal, the videos, the blackmail, the Bill Gates and the celebrities. The DOJ's own memo said they had no credible evidence for any of this, yet he talked about it openly. How does a man that barely knew Epstein know about all of this? There are a few possible answers. One, he's smart. He figured it out himself. He's clearly intelligent and maybe he pieced it all together. Two is that he knew more about this operation than he admitted. Howard's one of the top financiers in New York. he's gonna be in all of these elite circles and people talk. Maybe he heard something. I'm not saying he participated, but maybe he knew more than he let on. 3 is that if Epstein's blackmail operation was about collecting leverage on powerful people, it's worth asking what was the nature between Howard and Epstein's relationship. And it's also worth asking why a lot of people maintained contact with him years and years after his conviction. Was it friendship? The documents don't suggest that they were close friends. Was it business? A small adfin investment doesn't explain 13 years of contact. Lutnick himself told us what Epstein was selling. Get a massage, get a massage. He said that that's how Epstein made his money. I'm not making an accusation. I'm saying that the person who explained Epstein's operation in detail after he was convicted, he claimed he had no more contact, but he actually kept it for 13 years. Whose wife sends an email to Epstein's assistant with her kids' ages and genders and exactly how many people they are. I'm not going to tell you what this all means put together. I'm just saying you have all the pieces. I want to ask you a simple question. If I or you lied to the American public, what would happen to us? If documents later came out that just a few months ago we claimed we had no contact and now it's proven we had contact for 13 years, what would happen to us? We both know the answer. So why is Howard Lutnick still there? The standard explanation is Trump wants him and protects him. Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary, said that Trump stands behind the Commerce Secretary 100%. But that just moves the question further back. Why does Trump protect him? And I think to answer that, you need to understand what Howard Lutnick's position in the administration actually is. He's not just the Commerce Secretary. He's the man who built the cabinet. He screened every appointment. He decided who got in and who got left out, which means he knows where every skeleton is because he was there when the closets were being filled. He controls the tariff agenda, the central policy to Trump's whole plan. Without Lutnick, the architecture of that agenda falls apart. His family custodies the reserve backing of the world's largest digital stablecoin. And this is at a moment where America is trying to make digital currencies a center of its monetary policy. Tether doesn't work without Cantor, and Cantor is the Lutnick family. He's the most significant pro-Israel donor at a time the Middle East policy is being rewritten. He's not a cabinet member who can be replaced. He's load-bearing infrastructure. And load-bearing infrastructure gets protected no matter what. But there's one thing that I keep coming back to. Howard said that Epstein was collecting videos on powerful people that they wouldn't want to be released, and that those videos were traded for his plea deal. But think about what that statement actually reveals. If Epstein had videos of powerful people, and if those videos were the reason he only got 18 months, then somewhere those videos exist, and the people on them know they got recorded. Those people have been living with that knowledge for years, maybe a decade, and maybe those people are now in the most powerful offices in the world. There's a concept in intelligence work called a cutout. A cutout is a person who sits between two parties who can't be seen to have a direct relationship. They pass information and facilitate deals. They maintain connections that don't officially exist, and they're always in the room. They're never the ones making the decisions. And if anything goes wrong, they're the ones who can't remember. Now, I want to be clear about what I'm about to say. This is a theory, not an accusation. I have no evidence that Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, was a knowing participant with Epstein or an intelligence asset. But there's one question that I think it's worth sitting with. If you were designing a cutout for Washington, Wall Street, and the Epstein network, you would want someone who controls the Treasury bond market, who custodies the reserve global stablecoin, who built the cabinet, who was deeply embedded into Israel networks, who negotiates trade policy affecting every single person on Earth, who knew Epstein, did business with Epstein, went to the island and he said he can't remember why. That description fits one person. I'm not saying he is the one, I'm saying the question deserves to be asked. Here's what I know for certain. This man has been found in a documented lie with a child sex offender. In any other era, that would end a career. In this administration, it gets you a press conference where the secretary says you are a very important member of the team. The most dangerous person in the room isn't the loudest. It's the one who's always there, smiling, even if everything's getting burnt or it's being built. Look, I want to be straight up with you. I don't know what Howard Lutnick did or didn't do. I don't know if those videos exist, and I don't know what went on that island. What I do know is that the documents I've shown you are quite weird and they're worth being examined. Every source in this video is linked in the description. You can read it for yourself and form your own view. And if you think I got something wrong, tell me in the comments and I'll address it. Because the goal isn't to tell you what to think. The goal is to make sure you have enough to think. His name's Howard Lutnick. Now you know it.